Hello, and welcome to the Monitor Center for Learning and Research at Fairleigh Dickinson University on the Florham campus and the Florham Campus Library. At the Florham Campus Library, we house a number of collections. We have reference works, we have circulating books that you may check out, and we also have a variety of special collections. My name is Breege Burke, and I'm the Associate University Librarian and Director of Technical Services for both the Florham and Metropolitan campuses. Technical Services deals with the ordering of materials, so not only do we worry about acquiring books and databases and media and things like that, but we also preserve the archives that the university has, both in digital form and in print form. And it's in my role as the head of that department that I want to talk to you today about one of the special collections that we have at the Florham campus, the Black Literature Collection. Now, the Black Literature Collection was formed by Dr. James Fraser, who was the director of the Florham Campus Library from 1970 until his retirement in 2001. Dr. Fraser was an extremely talented man, and among his many talents, he was an expert in antiquarian books. He recognized that the library had a huge number of important works by authors of African descent, many of them first editions with their dust jackets. And if you know anything about book collecting, the dust jacket of a book makes it much more valuable. He decides to start putting these books into a special collection sometime in the early 1990s, and the collection grew to include about 489 titles. We still maintain this collection in the Technical Services Department of the Florham Campus Library. Now, the dates of these particular books range from 1888 to 2008 and include a wide range of African authors from all parts of the world. In this video, I just want to highlight a few of these works. First one I'm going to mention is Copper Sun by County Cullen. Now, this was published in 1927 by Harper and Brothers. County Cullen was an American poet, novelist, children's writer, and playwright, particularly well known during the Harlem Renaissance. He was a firm believer that poetry surpassed race and that it could be used to bring races closer together. Although race was a recurring theme in his works, Cullen wanted to be known as a poet not strictly defined by race. In this particular collection, Cullen examines the sense of love, particularly love or unity between white and black people, although he also deals with love in other capacities, love that can lead to death, which doesn't sound particularly joyful, and also love of nature and things like that. But we see an interesting theme of love here and of unity. Another book in our collection is Fields of Wonder by Langston Hughes. Now, this was published in 1947, and most of you are probably familiar with Langston Hughes. If you're not, he was an American poet, social activist, novelist, playwright, and columnist from Joplin, Missouri. He was one of the earliest innovators of the new literary art form of the time called jazz poetry. Hughes is best known as a leader of the Harlem Renaissance movement. He was one of the few prominent black writers to champion racial consciousness as a source of inspiration for black artists. However, throughout the late 1960s and into the 70s, Hughes found himself at odds with other black writers who were a bit angrier in their expressions and in their writing, and Hughes was a writer who always seemed to feel that one should leave anger out of writing and should try to focus more on coming together as a community. So he had some difficulties during that time period, clashing with others. However, that all said, Hughes was also somebody who was very interested in bringing black authors to influence by helping them, introducing them to influential literary figures, introducing them to influential publishers, and trying to help them get their careers started. And one notable person whose career he helped start was Alice Walker. This particular volume of poetry, again, focuses on these same themes, but it's sort of interesting. The New York Times have described it as something that had that was noted for its sort of brevity of verse. So it's very, very concise in the way that it's written. Interesting volume. Another volume we have in the collection is called Black Power by Richard Wright. This was published in 1954. Now, Richard Wright is known for some other works. He's known for his autobiography, which was very well received, called Black Boy, and also for his work Native Son, something you may have encountered in your, whether you're taking classes or you've studied in the past, probably that is a book you have encountered at some point. Richard Wright was an American author of novels, short stories, poems, and nonfiction. Much of his literature concerns racial themes, of course, especially related to the plight of African Americans during the late 19th into mid-20th century, of course, who just suffered much discrimination and violence in both the South and the North of the United States. Literary critics believe his work helped change race relations in the U.S. by the mid-20th century. His most famous works, as I mentioned, include Black Boy and Native Son. Now, in Black Power, what we see, this is a work actually talking about the African Gold Coast and about the way in which colonialism in Africa, British colonialism in particular, has clashed with the tribal cultures that are there, or how they have mixed in ways that perhaps are not always favorable. Kirkus reviews describe this as something of a frightening book, although, as they note, it may be frightening, but as they say, it must be accepted as an important, if sometimes difficult, contribution. So this is an example of a work that talks about the plight of Africa itself, rather than just the African American side of things, but also the side of issues that are going on in Africa, or were going on in Africa. The next one is called This Child's Gonna Live by Sarah E. Wright. I wanted to be sure to include a female author. Now, Sarah Wright was a novelist, poet, essayist, and social activist. She died in 2009, and she was born in Maryland during what we think of now as Jim Crow times. She helped, and she actually was very influential in organizing writers groups, both for black writers and for women writers. Particularly, they say she organized the first and second National Conference of Black Writers and the Congress of American Writers, and was president of Pen and Brush Incorporated, which was the oldest professional organization of women in the U.S., as well as the Harlem Writers Guild, Penn, the Authors Guild, and the International Women's Writing Guild. So she is very much a very accomplished woman. This particular novel that came out in 1969 tells the story of Maria Upshur, the wife of a poor oysterman, and her struggles to keep her land and family together amidst the harsh realities of rural African-American life at that time, and was very well received at the time. The last one I'm going to highlight for today is an author from South Africa, Blok Modisane, and this is a book called Blame Me on History, published in 1963. Now, Blok Modisane, whose name's actually William, he died in 1986, born in 1923. He was better known as Blok, and he's a South African writer, actor, and journalist. He grew up in Sophiatown, a multiracial suburb in Johannesburg, South Africa. His father was murdered, and his mother struggled to give the family a better life. Modisane tried to facilitate non-racial progress in the arts by making concerts and theater available to black audiences, and tried to further the efforts of the Arts Federation and the Union of South African Artists, both of which were non-racial. This particular work is autobiographical and was actually banned at the time. It was a work on the policy, basically his experience of the policy of apartheid, which was the segregation of blacks and whites in South Africa at that time, which is a rather explosive racial policy that finally ended. I want to say it was in the 1990s. It was when Nelson Mandela ended up becoming president. And it was a long and arduous journey, and a very, very sad, as they say here. It's an account of it's an indictment of apartheid, because it was a very cruel and inhumane policy, and it still resonates even today, and reminds us of the importance of racial inclusiveness. Currently, the Black Literature collection is off limits because of COVID. However, when COVID restrictions lift, students, faculty, and staff can set up appointments with the librarian to look at materials in this collection. Since it's a special collection, the items can't leave the library and must be used according to archival rules. The image I have here is of the usual archival protocol, which is usually you wear gloves, you look at it in a special room in the library, and usually there's a supervision by a librarian or designated staff, simply because of the rarity of these materials. We will have published in our subject guide on Black literature a list of the materials in this collection. So if there are authors that you see at this time that you would like to read, then we can certainly, we may have these books in our circulating collection and can certainly pull them for you to be checked out. If we don't have something in the circulating collection that we have in the Black Literature collection, we are happy to try to acquire it for you and also have it held for you upon request. But we certainly, once the COVID rules are lifted and we are able to interact more freely again, we certainly welcome the use of this collection by students interested in African history, literature, and culture. Thank you very much for watching, and I ask you to visit the FDU Library's website at library.fdu.edu/library, and to see a broader perspective on the archives we have on FDU history, please visit the FDU Digital Library at fdu.edu/digital library as one word. Thanks again for listening.